Hey friend, Colin here from Sumthins Recording, and today I'm going to show you the best way to easily quantize drums in Studio One. So let's jump in here and let me show you what we're working with here. So first of all, you can hear it's a really good performance by the drummer, and that's one of the things that's going to make your life extremely easy when you're quantizing drums. If you have a good performance by the drummer, it's going to make everything you do on the back end to get these drums on the grid so much easier and so much simpler because you're not going to have to fight the performance they put out for you. Now, the first piece of the puzzle here, before we even get into quantizing our drums, a couple caveats. You want to make sure any processing that you were recording through or that you had on any of your tracks is bounced and rendered to the actual audio files. You don't want to quantize and then render your audio because then you could get some weird artifacts from processing post-quantized audio rather than processing the pre-quantized audio, which is what you actually put the processing on when you're recording. So just the first piece of the puzzle, before you do anything, make sure you bounce any plugins you have and render them to the actual audio. Now, we're also going to create a layer here before we quantize our drums in case we want to get back to the unquantized files here. So I'm going to copy or highlight everything here. I'm going to highlight all of our drum tracks, kick in all the way down to our room, and I'm going to create or duplicate a layer here. So I'm going to duplicate these audio files down to another layer, and we'll just call it OG for original drums there. We'll close our layers. If you don't have a shortcut set up, you can right click and come down to layers and duplicate layer. I have a shortcut created here in Studio One, which is just Control L to duplicate layers. I'm going to make sure layers follow events is off as well here. Now we're going to jump in to actually doing the work to quantize our drums here. When we're quantizing our drums, we want to isolate the most important elements to snap to the grid. So for a live drum kit here with multiple mics going on and some of the spot mics, some of the drums here, I'm going to pick the kick in and the snare top. The reason being is these are going to be the most accurate on the drums. So for the kick drum, we want the mic that's inside the drum that's going to be the closest to where contact is being made with the drum, which is going to be our kick in mic because it's inside the drum and it's closer to where he's making contact with the drum, where our kick out mic is a little bit further away. Same principle goes for our snare drum. We're going to pick the snare top mic because it's closer to where he's striking the drum, and our snare bottom is a little bit further away. It's obviously on the opposite side of the drum there. So we're going to start with our kick in. We're going to highlight our kick in here. We're going to come up to the audio bend function here, and we are going to analyze it or detect it for bend markers and transients here. So we're going to click Analyze. It'll go through and detect it. And what I like to do just to be a little bit more accurate is I like to listen through here and get rid of anything that's not a kick drum hit. So I'm going to solo up our kick in, and we can see we have some right off the bat here if we listen through. So we can see it's getting these tom hits here going into our first downbeat, and it's actually grabbing some of the snare hits here as well. So what we can do is we can come up to the threshold, and we can just lower the threshold a little bit here and see if we can get rid of some of these extraneous hits. So we pull it down to 60. Now we want to listen through and make sure we only have kick drum. You can see we have some doubles here, so we might have to raise our threshold back up as we work our way through, but let's listen through and see how everything is sounding. What we're looking for is anything that's not a kick drum, and we're going to use the bend tool here to delete that bend marker. We don't want to be analyzing anything that's not our kick drum here. As you work your way through and you're listening to see if there's anything extra that's not a kick drum, you can actually use anything that's below that track to see. So I like having the kick out mic here as well as the snare top and bottom. I can kind of see right off the bat if there's anything here. I can see where the snare hits are and make sure there's not a bend marker where the snare is. And I can also use the kick out mic to see where our kick hits are and make sure the bend markers are matching up. That makes it a little bit easier to kind of skim through with your eyes and jump to just the busier sections here. So we're going to keep listening and finish out our kick drum here. All right, we've made it through our kick drum and made sure the bend markers are only on hits that are our actual kick drum, nothing else like our snare drum or any of the tom fills there. This is the only tedious part of the process here, but we make sure here that when we snap to the grid, whether we're using just the bend tool here or we're using the automatic function, that it's not grabbing anything that's not our kick drum. And when we do the snare, we're going to make sure it's not grabbing anything that's not our snare drum and snapping it to a place that it shouldn't be. So we've done our kick drum. We're going to come down and we're going to do the same process on our snare top, because remember, these are our two most important elements here on our drums, the kick in and our snare top. So we're going to analyze the same way we did on our kick drum. We'll zoom in. We can see right off the bat it's grabbing things that aren't our snare drum. So we'll just pull the threshold down a little bit. And sometimes I'm not too crazy about it having the doubles on the snare, so maybe I'll pull it down a little bit more. It's still keeping it there at 60, so I'm going to roll with that. And it's looking pretty good. The snare drum is so much easier to kind of work through than the kick drum, especially if it's a pretty basic song like this. So I'm going to hit play, we're going to listen through and make sure we're only hitting things that are our snare drum, but you can see it's a lot less busy than our kick drum, so we can zoom out a lot easier and identify our hits here. Same thing, we'll highlight the track below, which is our snare bottom, and it's going to give us a better visual of where our big snare hits are. Everything's looking really good to me. What I might do here, if you're gonna use the automatic function, sometimes the little ghosts are easy enough to just delete here. So I'm gonna grab our bend tool and these little rolls going into our bigger hits. I'm just gonna nuke those for the moment. So see, like this one here, that one's not recognized, which is fine. And it's going to make sure that our bend marker only snaps this piece, and it'll drag that guy along with it, which is going to make it sound much cleaner as a result. So let's keep listening. So you can see our snare drum is much easier. It's a little less tedious than our kick drum. We can kind of zoom out and just look at an overview and make sure we're just getting our snare drum hits there. We kind of nuked some of the little rolls in there, so it's not grabbing it as an essential bend marker and pinning it somewhere that we don't need it. Now that we have our bend markers set, what I'm going to do is I'm going to group the drums all together. So I'll highlight from our kick in all the way to our room mic. Command G is the shortcut to create a group. Not too worried about naming it here. We're just creating it to quantize our drums. Now we'll highlight all of our audio files, and I like to activate the bend marker mode on all of them. That way they all look the same, and I know everything is selected when I look down. Then we want to make sure on the group that it's only looking at the 2 tracks that we put bend markers on. So our kick in and our snare top. So if we do use the automatic function, it's only going to snap our kick in and our snare top to the grid. It's not going to look at anything else when it snaps our drums to the grid, but because they're grouped together, all of these tracks are going to move together according to the bend markers set on our kick in and our snare top. It works the same way if we do it by hand here, because we're using the kick in and the snare top as our guides. So first of all here, I'm going to show you if you want to go in and do it by hand. It's a little bit more tedious, but sometimes it's more accurate. If you have a track that's a little bit more intense, especially on the kick drum and the snare drum, if the snare drum's really busy, it kind of helps to go in and do this stuff by hand. But if you have a track like this that's not as busy, we can kind of zoom out and see our snare drum. It's pretty basic here on the 2s and 4s. And our kick drum is pretty basic, just has some doubles going into it. So it wouldn't be too big of a deal if we just hit apply here. But I do want to show you how it works if we go in and do it by hand. So if we zoom in here, we want to use the bend tool, and all we're going to do is grab a bend marker and then snap it to the spot we want it to be in. Same thing here. So that would go there. And then we can see our 4 here. Snap the snare drum to our 4. And you only want to do it on the kick in and the snare top. So only the places that you put your essential bend markers. And we would just work our way through the track like this. So you can see it wouldn't take too long. This is only about a 4-minute track or so. So it might take me 10 minutes to make it through. You're literally kind of just listening through the track and just snapping these pieces together here. And if you have a pretty powerful computer, you can get working pretty fast with this process here. So all we would do is just work our way through the track like this, and we would just snap each bend marker to the spot. And you can see here as we're working that this performance was pretty spot on by the drummer, which makes it really easy to quantize. The further off your performance is, the further off your drummer is, the more artifacts you get with quantizing the drums, because you're stretching it and you're moving it to a place that it wasn't. So sometimes you can get pitch issues and you can get timing issues stretching the drums and getting artifacts in there. So the better the performance right at the source by the drummer, the better it's going to sound after you quantize. So that's how we could do it by hand. The other way you could do it is automatically. So since we have everything grouped together, I'm going to make sure all of these tracks are highlighted, and I'm going to come up here. You can select the strength, so if you don't want to snap everything all the way onto the grid, if you want to leave a little bit more of the human element in, you can pull the strength down to maybe 80, 75% here. You can also do different things if you don't want to quantize. If you want to slice everything at the transient and then move it around that way, you can do that. We're going to leave it on quantize here. Again, our guides are kick in and snare top, and we're going to hit apply here. It's going to snap everything to the grid. Now what you want to do is you want to listen through and make sure it didn't snap something to somewhere it shouldn't be. So if your drummer's a little bit further off on a hit and it's closer to the previous beat, it'll snap it there. So all we're going to do now is listen through. We're going to use our bend tool here, and we're going to just see if there's any spots that snap to a place they shouldn't have. So let's listen through here. So right there we had a little bit of an issue because it's snapping the kick drum to where it should be, and then it's snapping our snare to a weird location according to that. So take a listen. So let's fix that, and let's drag this center kick hit a little bit closer to this guy here. So all we're going to do is grab that and pull it out a little bit more, and we can actually see if we can get it to a spot where it makes things sound a little bit more natural here. So we'll put it in the middle for the moment, see how that sounds there. And actually, let's see if we drag that last hit over. I'm concerned it's probably late, right? But let's see if we put that there and this here, and let's see how that sounds. That might be not what the fill was. No, that's what our fill should have been. So we can see things got a little bit jumbled there, but listen to how much cleaner our fill is now. Same thing here, right? So we'll drag this snare hit over, snap that there, and we'll drag our kick hit over, and let's listen through and make sure that's clean now. So we can see these other fills that were pretty similar to our early ones. Those ones are sitting really nicely. We've got a roll coming up here at the end of the chorus. Let's see how that's sitting. So we had another fill that was a little bit wonky sounding there. Let's snap our snare drum to where it should be. And you can see there's two bend markers here. There's one on our kick drum and one on our snare drum. Because the snare is the more prominent element here, I'm going to make sure the snare is snapped to the grid, and then we'll snap our kick into place here. We'll go back a little bit and we'll take a listen. We had a little bit of a weird clip there. Sometimes you can get an artifact, and if you just grab a bend marker and move it and re-snap it, sometimes it'll get rid of that artifact. Let's take a listen. So we had a little bit of a wonky piece there. Let's push our snare to where it should be. Right there. Let's see how that's sounding. And then things look a little wonky in the middle, but we'll kind of listen through going into this big fill. So everything's a little bit off here. We can see where we're supposed to land going in. So if we move everything over just a beat here, we'll see if we can get closer to where everything should be. So let's pull this down one, that down one. So this is that place where maybe the drummer rushed the fill a little bit. So they were a little bit ahead, and the bend markers snapped to the beat before where they should have been. So we're going to move the big fill first, and then we'll look at what's going on before the fill here. Let's see how this feels now. So the fill sounds great. We got a little wonky after it here. Let's fix this guy. I think this should be here. Let's feel how that sounds. Yeah, so we have this one wonky bar after our drum fill. Still a little bit early coming out here. So we're going to move everything back one here. Let's see how we're sounding there. Oh, we're a little bit weird there, so I pushed everything too far. Let's pull that back to there. I think we're supposed to be at the 10 mark instead of the 11 mark there. Let's see how that sounded now. See if we're closer. So same thing here. We can see the drummer speeds up just a little bit on this fill, and we end up landing just a touch early there. So we're going to move all of these beats over one and make sure everything is snapping into place where it should. We should probably be here. So let's go back. Let's take a listen now, see how this fill's sounding. Same thing, coming out of our fill, everything's just a touch wonky. We come in a little early on that. And I think we come in a little early here as well. Let's take a listen. So we got a little messed up here in this section. Let's see what's going on. Are we landing early? That's what's going on there. So we're landing early. Let's pull that back. This should be here, I believe. Let's listen. So we landed in the right spot, but everything before it was a little early. So let's move everything over. Same thing here. you can see once you get into the groove of things, you'll kind of feel out where the drummer was on some of these spots. And you'll be able to see, like, maybe he rushes some of his fills and kind of look out for that. Let's see how this is sounding now. Same thing here, coming out of our big fill. We're a touch early. So just bumping that over. I think we were fine there. Let's listen on that second pass there. A little early going into this last chorus. You can see this is the tedious part, but it's honestly the most important part, because if we just hit apply and everything snaps to wherever it snaps to, we can end up with something that is not what our drummer played. Let's listen. So we got a little artifact there when we moved that kick, so I'm just going to grab this snare and re-snap it, see if that'll rid us of that little pop there. Let's keep moving. Fills a little earlier, so same thing we've been seeing. That's our pattern with our drummer here. He's just rushing these fills a little bit. So we're moving everything a beat later. And the nice thing here is that if you have a good drummer, you don't have to do any work on the toms, which is something I really, really dislike doing, is putting bend markers on toms and trying to snap toms and fills. If you have a good drummer and you have a good performance, doing it on just the kick in and the snare top is going to get you where you want to be. If the drummer's a little sloppier and they're maybe not as good as they should be to play the song, then you got to do a little bit more work on the toms as well. Here, let's take a listen to this fill. So we got the same thing coming out of our fill here. We end up a little bit early. Let's take a listen. So we have some weirdness going on this pass here. I'm going to pull this over because that's where that seems like it should be. And it looks like, again, we're ending early here. So let's pull this piece back to make sure we're not rushing there. And where it's a kick drum, I'm going to snap the kick drum to the grid. Where it's a snare drum, I'm going to snap the snare drum to the grid. Good. Good. Snare drum there. And then we'll pull our kick out. And same thing here. I think this can come out a piece. So let's take a listen now to this fill. And then coming out of it, we're a little messy there too. That's why it's important to listen through after we hit our auto quantize. These should be over 1, I believe. Let's take a listen. Same thing, so we're a little early here. Let's pull that over 1. It looks like this is early too, so we'll snap that over while we're here. That needs to go over 1. And that needs to go over 1. Oh, a little too far. Just to our 11 point there. Let's listen. Same thing here. Our fill's a little bit early, so let's pull this in. And again, where it's a snare that's prominent, I'm going to put the snare on the grid. Where it's a kick that's prominent, I'm going to put the kick on the grid here. And then all of these need to come over as well, I believe. Let's make sure we're not pushing something. All right, so this here at the end, I believe that's our cymbal hit. Let's take a listen. That's the end of our song. We'll fix this because it's going to be on the fade out here, but it's not too important. Just the same thing we've been experiencing with our fills here. Just pulling everything over 1. And that should be that. Let's take a listen. And that's the end of our song there. So now we've listened all the way through. We've made sure everything is sounding clean. All the bend markers, all the hits are in the place that they should be. You can do one final listen through here, and I advise doing one final listen through to make sure you didn't miss anything. But once you are satisfied with everything, you want to highlight all of your tracks because they're grouped. We can just click on one of them. We'll make sure everything is in line, and then we want to bounce these so we don't have a whole bunch of bend markers taking up a bunch of processing in our session here. So the shortcut for bouncing is Command B, and it's going to bounce down all of our files here and give us just finished audio files. So we'll have our kick in, kick out, snare top, bottom, our 4 rack toms, our overheads, and our room mic, and we won't have any nasty bend markers taking up processing here in our session. So now we have a clean drum kit that we can listen through, clean audio files, fresh and ready to go for our mix session. I hope that was helpful for you. If you're looking to go a little bit deeper into the drum mixing process and you want to start dialing in a repeatable workflow for cranking out professional sounding drums right from your home studio, then I have just the thing for you. It is my 3-step framework for mixing drums workshop, and it's just a simple workshop, simple video training that's going to walk you through my 3-step process that I use almost every single one of my mixes to get professional sounding drum mixes right from your home studio. It is a completely free on-demand video training, and you can get instant access to that by clicking the link below in the video description. Thank you so much for watching here today, and I will see you in the next video.